The air in the small, cluttered room was thick with the scent of old books, jasmine incense, and the unspoken. Ritu, at 17, was a study in contrasts, her body a woman's, her eyes those of a child who had seen too much. Ram, at 35, carried the wary authority of a man who had lived a life of quiet desperation, his face etched with lines that told stories of loss and loneliness. Their connection was a secret, a fragile, beautiful, and terribly forbidden thing. The world saw a student and her private tutor. In the hushed hours of the afternoon, when the rest of the city dozed, they were two souls clinging to each other in a storm. Today, the romantic poets, Ram said, his voice a low rumble, his hand resting on the open page of a poetry book. But his eyes weren't on the text, they were tracing the delicate curve of Ritu's neck, the way a single strand of dark hair fell across her cheek. Ritu didn't look at the book either, she looked at him. "Tell me about the terrible beauty, sir," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing the hair from her face. "Some things are so beautiful, so pure, that their very existence feels like a tragedy waiting to happen," he murmured, echoing the poet's sentiment. "Like a single perfect flame burning in the dark." The lessons always ended the same way. The book would fall to the floor, forgotten. His hands would find her waist, her hands would find his chest, and they would fall into a desperate embrace. He was her anchor, the first person who made her feel seen, not as a child, but as a woman. She was her renewal, a spark of youth and passion in the monotony of his failed marriage and professional disappointments. Their stolen moments were built on a house of cards, a terrifying reality they both chose to ignore. And it was on a Thursday, a day that seemed as ordinary as any other, that the house came crashing down. Ritu's mother, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper sense of suspicion, had returned early. She had knocked. The sight that met her in the cramped study was one of clear transgression. Her daughter, her child, in the arms of her middle-aged tutor. The betrayal, the shock, the rage, it was a primal explosion that shattered the quiet of the afternoon. The screaming began. Accusations flew like shrapnel. "Predator, you've ruined her. I will call the police." Ram stood frozen, his hands held up in a futile gesture of defense. Ritu wept, pleading, "It's not like that, Ma. I love him." But love in that moment had no currency. The world with its laws and its judgments had invaded their sacred space. The police were called, neighbors gathered, their faces a mix of morbid curiosity and righteous indignation. What followed was a storm of unimaginable proportions. Ram was taken away, not with dignity, but with his hands cuffed behind his back, his head bowed under the weight of a society's scorn. The whispers began, spreading like wildfire through the neighborhood. "Did you hear? The tutor and the schoolgirl. Disgusting. He took advantage of her." The narrative was written, the roles assigned, the predator and his victim. For Ritu, the world collapsed. Her mother, whose love had been her bedrock, now looked at her with a mixture of horror and pity. She was locked in her room, her phone taken, her freedom gone. Her friends, once confidants, now avoided her gaze. The boys who used to flirt with her now looked at her with a knowing, ugly smirk. She was no longer Ritu, she was that girl, the one who had been spoiled. The shock of the public shame was just the beginning. A few weeks later, as the school year ended and the whispers dulled to a constant hum, Ritu's body began to betray her secret. The nausea in the mornings, the exhaustion, the missing period, they all pointed to a terrifying truth. She was pregnant. A child born from the heat of their stolen passion now grew within her, the most profound and devastating consequence of all. She couldn't tell her mother. The woman was already a shell of her former self, consumed by the scandal. Ritu felt a new, chilling kind of isolation. She was utterly and completely alone, carrying a life that was a living testament to her ruination. Ram too was disintegrating. His wife, who had long been absent, filed a humiliating public divorce. He was fired from his teaching position. His name became synonymous with disgrace. He tried to see Ritu, to send messages, to offer some form of support, but he was blocked at every turn, branded a danger and a criminal. His love for her, once so powerful, now felt like a curse. He had wanted to give her the world, but instead he had become the architect of her destruction. He moved to a distant city, unable to face the ruins he had left behind. Every day was a cycle of guilt and a desperate longing for Ritu, a longing he had no right to feel. He took a menial job, living in a single room, haunted by the memory of her face, her touch, the sound of her laughter. In a different part of the city, Ritu finally gave birth in a sterile, impersonal hospital room. Her mother was there, her face a mask of stoic sorrow, but the bond between them was irrevocably fractured. As she held her son, a tiny, perfect replica of the man she had loved and lost, Ritu felt a profound emptiness. She looked at the child, and for a fleeting moment, she saw Ram in the curve of his cheek, in the way his tiny fingers curled. It was a beautiful and agonizing reminder. She named him Arav, meaning peaceful, a name she hoped would be a prophecy for the life he would have, a life she was determined to give him, even if it meant sacrificing her own dreams. The terrible consequence wasn't just the pregnancy, it was the crushing weight of societal judgment, the loss of her childhood, the destruction of her family's peace, and the birth of a child into a world of shame and secrecy. Years later, Ritu was no longer a girl, she was a young woman, a single mother working long hours at a clothing boutique, her face etched with a weariness that belied her age. Arav was a bright, inquisitive boy of 6, the center of her universe. One afternoon, while taking him to the park, she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. "Ritu?" She turned, and her breath caught in her throat. It was Ram. He was older now, his hair heavily streaked with grey, his face thinner, his eyes filled with a profound, haunted sadness. He was standing a few feet away, clutching a worn book. He looked at her, then at the little boy holding her hand. The recognition in his eyes was a devastating thing. He saw the child. He saw his son. The years of silence, the months of desperate longing, the weight of their shared history crashed over them. He took a hesitant step forward, his hand reaching out, trembling. "Ritu?" he whispered again, his voice cracking. I never stopped." But Ritu took a step back, pulling Arav closer to her. Her heart was a storm of emotions, surprise, anger, a terrifying flicker of the old love. But above all, she felt a fierce, protective surge. This man, the one she had loved with all her heart, had brought her nothing but a lifetime of pain. Her mother had passed away the year before, still broken by the scandal. Ritu was finally building a new life, a quiet, stable one for her son. The terrible consequence of their love wasn't just a single event, it was a chain reaction of ruin. The boy, a symbol of that love, also stood as a monument to all that was lost. Looking at him, Ritu knew that some promises, made in secret and sealed in fire, were never meant to be kept. They were meant to burn the world down. She looked at Ram, her eyes dry, her face a mask of hard-won peace. "Please," she said, her voice low and steady, "don't come near us again." She turned, taking her son's hand, and walked away, leaving Ram standing alone in the park, holding a book of poetry, the pages filled with the beautiful, tragic words he could no longer bring himself to read. The consequences of their terrible love were now complete, a legacy of silence and separation that would stretch on for a lifetime.